My name's Toni Kelly. I've been involved with Schoms for quite a number of years, and let me just move this. Catherine and Tess and Caroline and I were at a hotel in ISC this year chatting about whether or not my time at Hong Kong was coming to an end and what I was going to do. And so it was decided that perhaps it might be fun for me to have a look back at my years in Schoms and some of the other history. So today I was going to have a little look at some of the history. Hopefully I've got some amusing stories, and we'll go through a few memories. So Simon's got the tissues at the ready, I think. So as I say, when I was posted to the job in, well, posted, that sounds so... when I was given the opportunity to go to Hong Kong, it was only for a 3-year period. And so I was really keen to make sure that I kept in touch with my contacts here in the UK. So I've been to ISC every year, and I've been to Schoms every year, because these are the places that I come and meet like-minded people. There's only me doing my job at Hong Kong, so it's good to get back to an association like this and be able to have the conversations that we all value. So as I say, the girls were in the hotel, and they invited me to speak, and I thought, oh, this was really lovely. Until a couple of weeks ago, my lovely friend Paul, where is he? There he is, was passing through Hong Kong after a trip to China, and he came along to the little island that I live on for dinner, and he found an interesting dish to obviously English is their obviously English is their second language, so they're allowed a few mistakes. So we're having dinner, and Paul leans over and he said, "Oh, I hear you're going to give a presentation at Schoms. You're going to have to go some to beat Nita." So, for those of you who remember Nita Spektorov, who was Director of Media Services at Leicester, Russian lady, big character, lots of presentations. I should have actually got in touch with her and got her presentation. But Nita gave a couple of infamous presentations. The first one at Birmingham in 2002. So Steve, we're due another conference. And at this particular conference, I was her young and unassuming assistant, and she delivered a presentation with a number of anecdotes. And at the end of each anecdote, she ended with a letter. And by the time she'd finished her stories, it spelled something rather rude, which referred to her academic colleagues. And then again, she presented in Warwick. She actually stepped down from her role in 2007, and she was invited back to talk. And she was no less irreverent, but not quite so impolite. So I just decided I'm not going to try and beat Nita at her game. So in the beginning, my first contact with Schoms was on the 4th of February in 2000. The first formal executive meeting was being held in a meeting room in our television and film unit at the University of Birmingham, and I happened to have an office in this same space. And at lunchtime, I was pootling through our rather large entrance hall to be greeted by this fabulous buffet and a number of people from various universities who turned out to be the Schoms exec. At the time, Keith Buckman was chair. He was at Brunel University at the time. And then some old names that some people in the room will still remember. David Brooke, David Cleverly, Sean Edwards, Anne Mumford, Diaries Jones, who Paul... Sadly no longer with us, but was a big character. Nita and Therese from Leeds Metropolitan. And so I had a conversation with Keith, and he was saying, "Oh, well, doing your job, you really ought to be part of this group." So, and this is just a copy. We still have on record the first minutes from that meeting. Was that the first minute? Yes. So, the first actual Schoms conference was held at Loughborough on the 21st of September 2000. And there'd already been a huge amount of work being undertaken, and I think from about 1996 onwards, conversations have been going on about creating this group. And so by the time the first conference was held, there were 45 institutions. I couldn't make it, and this is a bit of a lesson in terms of if you're invited to something, you really should go. Because you'll see here, election of secretary, Toni Kelly was proposed by the chair and seconded by the treasurer, and this was unanimously agreed. Surprise, surprise. And then the rotten lot continued to elect me as secretary for the next 7 years. And it's needless to say, I was pretty rubbish secretary. But then going back to the lovely Nita, this is the email she sent to me just to let me know that I'd been elected, and this was my yeah, good old Nita. So it's been really good fun to look back over the years and look at some of the old minutes that I have from being secretary and some of the information. But we've actually had 28 conferences. And now, how did we do that in such a short period, you wonder? Well, the first few years of Schoms, we actually met twice a year. So we would have a lunchtime to lunchtime meeting in May and another lunchtime to lunchtime meeting in November. And it actually meant that you could sort of quickly leave your university and just go and meet up with your friends and colleagues and share a few stories and then get back to work and not take a big chunk of time out. But actually, you know, when we grew up, we got more and more members, more and more deeper programs that we wanted to run. We then decided to go to one conference a year. So in all of that time, only 2 institutions have hosted the conference twice, and that's Loughborough and the University of Bath. Now, looking through all of the information that I have, it turns out that I've managed to avoid all of the meetings in Loughborough. It's not deliberate, and I have been a few times, as Caroline knows, but I hadn't realised that I'd been avoiding Loughborough. So in terms of where have we been, we've actually been up and down the country, England, Scotland, Wales, and we've had some amazing experiences on some amazing campuses. Couldn't get everything onto a single slide. And of course, here we are in York today. And who knows where we'll be next year? Or you will be next year. So one of the things that is quite interesting for me is that there's been a very long link between University of Aberdeen and University of Hong Kong. And a few years ago, Aberdeen presented Hong Kong with its own tartan. I actually have a shawl, and I managed to leave it behind. I was going to wear it for the presentation, but anyway, so this is our previous, well, not our previous Vice-Chancellor, because he's now with Edinburgh, it's the one before. So yes, the links overseas, quite important. So in terms of Schoms and what it's meant to me over the years, well, first of all, it's the friendships. I've actually made a huge number of friends in Schoms. People that I actually see at other times of the year when we're not formally meeting as Schoms. And, you know, I see that those friendships will last. And in fact, a number of people who've been long-term members of Schoms who've since retired, we're still in contact and we still get together from time to time. And for an organisation to have those sorts of friendships, I think is really, really special. And Schoms will always be special to me. The fun, we've always had lots and lots of fun at a conference, and you know, lots of smiles, lots of happy people. But people are still very professional, you know, so we learn a lot from each other. We share things. We're incredibly inclusive, and when we're sharing things, you know, we don't just share the good things. We also tell the stories of what possibly didn't go so well. And also the big thing is that we really support each other. So if someone's having problems or difficulties with particular issues, you know, we will be there to help each other through that time. And then, of course, the conferences. As I said earlier, we've been to some amazing venues and seen some fantastic university campuses and been in some amazing rooms and experienced, you know, lots of different things. But the dinners have just gone from strength to strength to strength. It's almost, you know, each year, how can we better what we had last year? You know, so we've had dinners at football stadia, cricket at Headingley. We had a wonderful dinner cruise up the Thames a number of years ago. And some of you will remember that we were given clocks and compasses by Julian so that we would always remember where we are and the time. And not that it's 3:15 in the afternoon, but actually, you know, the time in terms of, you know, our lives and what we're doing. I still have the compasses and clock on my desk at home. We went to the Hull Sea Life Centre, which was a really exciting event, and we got mini fish and chips, which were probably better than the dinner. And for some reason at that conference, there were lots and lots and lots of prizes given out, and I'll come back to that later. You know, House for an Art Lover was a really special place. We've had dinner in a Scottish castle, the Roman Baths, and HMS Victory. I wasn't sure if it was Victory or Warrior.
Warrior.
Was it? You see, I knew I'd got the wrong one. Anyway, so HMS Warrior. And of course, we've been to Celtic Manor, and we had a fabulous hall that we were in last year. So I could go on and on and on about the events, but they've just been fantastic. So we've had our name up in lights in a football stadium. This is at Norwich City. At Newcastle, as arranged for the bridge to be lit up for us. I was actually lit up in Schoms colours at some point, but red, black and white is a little bit difficult to maintain. And then, you know, Hull with all the prizes. Do you remember that, Caroline? Yeah, so lots and lots of people getting out, going home with iPads. But on a more serious note, if you look around the room, you'll see that women aren't actually really that well represented within our industry. But actually, in terms of Schoms as an organisation, women have played a really major role in shaping and leading and developing the association that we have now. Keith was chair just for 1 year, and he was, Anne Mumford then came in as chair. And Anne came with a reputation. She'd worked with ACOG, and I can't quite remember what ACOG stands for anymore, but she had relationships with JISC and with HEFC and with other organisations. So she was well known in the sector. And she actually had a number of initiatives that she got involved with. So the Value for Money printing project, and I believe the information is still up on the website. Benchmarking, she was instrumental in developing the benchmarking project, and we've tried over the years to refine and encourage people to undertake the benchmarking project, but that's been one of the more challenging projects for Schoms. But Anne was also instrumental in talking to JISC about the need for research into the development of learning spaces. And as a result of Anne's work, JISC put out a call for bids to run a project to look at the impact of technology on the physical learning environment in the post-16 sector. And actually, the University of Birmingham won that bid, and we did the research, which eventually became the booklet that most of you know about designing spaces for effective learning. So we've got a lot to thank Anne for in terms of pushing forward the agenda for learning space development. Back to the wonderful Nita. Nita, as I say, been heavily involved in Schoms right from the beginning. She was a founder member of Schoms, but she was also instrumental in the development of creating the LTSMG. So at about 1996, she was already identifying that there was a need to have this kind of forum for technical staff who were working for us. She had a role as vice chair for a couple of years, from 2004 to 2006, and was a committee member just for another year until she retired. Her claim to fame is that she would come to conference with fabulous cakes that she'd baked to share amongst everybody. And in her office, I don't know if she still does this, she used to keep her dog under her desk, so she would bring her dog to work, and then at lunchtime she would go off and take the dog for a walk and then come back. And then this last point, because Leicester and Birmingham aren't too far away from each other, we would try to have lunch from time to time. And one day I got over to Leicester, and she said, we can't go yet, there's something to do. So we jumped in her car and she raced to I know not where, and suddenly we pulled into a garden of remembrance, parked up the car, walked into this lovely garden to find a group of her friends who, with an urn, and they were about to scatter the ashes of their friend, have a little service and scatter the ashes. It was pouring with rain. It was really very gothic and a bit weird, and I'm standing at the side, not knowing anybody, not knowing what's happening, and then 5 minutes later, all done, back in the car, off for a lovely lunch at the senior common room. Just odd, but memorable. Therese was involved in Schoms until 2005. Again, another founder member who helped to shape Schoms and worked very closely with Anne. Shona from Strathclyde, many of you here will still remember Shona. She worked as a committee member for 4 years. She worked for quite a long time on benchmarking, trying to refine it and develop it into something that was simple and would give us the kind of information that we really need. Shona's actually been on the British University's Film and Video Council board for many, many years, and although she's no longer working with Schoms, she's still working with the BUFVC, as is Steve Ellis, that many of you will know. And of course, we can't forget the ladies from today. So Caroline, this is a picture of Caroline delivering that presentation to Hong Kong. I'm actually trying to create a mini Schoms in Hong Kong. There are 8 formal universities there, and then there are a number of private universities. And it's quite alien to the culture there in terms of getting together and sharing things and actually giving away, your secrets. So it's been a bit of a slow burn in terms of getting these people to come together and talk to each other. They'll come and listen, but to actually get them to talk. So Caroline came along and introduced the toolkit to them, which they were really interested in. And then we played the Snakes and Ladders game, which went down really, really well and got a lot of conversation going. And actually, since then, there's been a little bit of online chatter. So I think we may be getting some traction there in terms of a Hong Kong chapter of Schoms. Of course, Tess, you know Tess, and she's heavily involved in the committee and doing a lot of work, as we have seen. And Jill, of course. So I think, there's been a huge amount of input from, as we're now nicknamed, the Scomettes. And I just wanted to make the point that I think it's a really interesting reflection on the kind of organisation this is. So some of you may recognise this incorrigible character. This is Danny Bell, who used to be at the University of Warwick. Anybody who's been involved in organising the conference knows just how much work goes into it. There's visits, there are emails, there are organisation to accommodation, what's the programme going to be like. It takes months and months and months to organise a good conference. Danny, however, he was the host of the Warwick conference. This is his philosophy. And this is what actually happened. So about 5 or 6 weeks before the conference was due to be held, fortunately it was a lunchtime to lunchtime short conference, but nothing had been done. No accommodation, no catering, nothing had been done. And literally Anne and Catherine then had to launch into action and get everything organised. And it was a great conference. They did a really good job. It was a really good conference. We were going to dinner in one of the local towns, and we're all waiting in reception, ready to go for dinner, and there's no transport. So suddenly an army of taxis had to turn up to take us to the meal. And I think also that was a conference where we noticed that Az Mohammed, who was at Newcastle, liked his steak, and I think he had 3 goes at getting the steak that evening. And so now we take bets on how many times Az has sent his steak back. But it's not just about organising a conference that Danny excelled in. The following year, we were due to we were meeting at University of East Anglia, and I was in the exhibition hall, and all of a sudden Danny walked in, and I thought, we're not expecting you, Danny. Have you registered? Oh, I don't know. Haven't I? Oh. So again, we have to sort of launch into making sure that there's a room for him and space at the table and whatnot.
And he fell off his chair that evening.
Oh, did he fall off his chair? No, you see, I didn't know that. But bless him. Now, I believe that since he's retired, he now spends his time driving up and down country lanes, towing his caravan and annoying the rest of the UK. So sticking with the Warwick conference, lots and lots of changes to the committee at that time. Anne stepped down. She'd had 6 years as chair and been incredibly influential. Nita also stepped down as vice chair. Therese retired. So big personalities and people who'd done a lot of work actually stepped down at the same time. And I became chair, and this is all Simon Burkitt's fault. So we were in the bar at one of Reflex's technology events, and he just turned around and said, "Well, you're going for chair this year?" And the thought had never crossed my mind. I didn't take it seriously, but look what happened. So I became chair, and Stuart Davis from Newport in Wales became the vice chair. And actually, I had met Stuart on a few occasions. He had been on the committee for a couple of years with me. Didn't really know him very well, hadn't really had much conversation with him. When we became chair and vice chair, he became one of my very, very best friends, and still is today. So just a few pictures of Warwick, Anne and Nita. Because Nita was famous for bringing her cakes to conference, we decided that it was time that we gave her a Schoms cake back, and we all shared that after dinner, and very delicious it was too. Obviously, Therese got her flowers. Anne giving one of her last talks at the conference dinner, and Stuart and I saying thanks, many thanks to Anne. So when Stuart and I became chair and vice chair, this was our first committee, so Stuart and I, Shona, Paul, Steve Ellis, Nigel Thomas, Simon Burkitt, Az Mohammed and Chris Brown. And actually the only two guys left standing are Paul and Simon. And I'm pleased to say that they've both had their opportunities to take the role as chair in the last few years. But there's no committee without this lady involved. She's the glue. She's nothing that we ever want to do can happen without Catherine's fantastic support. I think Catherine joined us from the Manchester conference, which would be 2003. Wow. See, time flies. So just a few things about Stuart, and although he was vice chair, he made massive changes to the way that we did things. For those of you who know Stuart, he's Mr. Personality. He can talk to anyone in their own language, and a very personable guy. Anne and I had been talking to AV Magazine about some sort of way that we could raise the Schoms profile and get more involved. But when Stuart came into those conversations, we then found ourselves in a position where for several years that we were invited to join the judging panel for the AV Awards. They developed a higher education category specifically for education. As a result of being on the judging panel for AV Awards, Stuart and I were added to the AV 100 list, and as a result of that, we were invited to an event down south where we met Mike Blackman, who is the CEO for Integrated Systems Europe. And we started to talk to Mike, and he then started to float the idea that there was actually something that ISE could do to help get more Schoms members out to ISE. Now, many people had already been to ISE as a result of contacts with their suppliers. So Roland from Reflex, GV Multimedia, and another number of other companies would actually take a group of their customers from higher education over to ISE. But that was very much, small group here and a small group there, no formal integrated program. But Roland did a huge amount to bring the higher education community together. He ran university workshops which were actually focusing on the procurement. I think he ran 4 or 5 of those. He ran technology days, and I believe Reflex still run the technology days. But a number of years ago, he hired a luxurious coach to take a number of people out to ISE, which we called a Reflex Fun Bus. And essentially, 2 or 3 times we went out?
Twice.
Maybe twice. So the first time we went out, it snowed, and the whole of London came to a standstill. I don't know if you can imagine London just covered in snow and nothing moving. And we drove through, and it took such a long time to get to Amsterdam that I think we did actually drink the bar dry, and we certainly ran out of gin and tonic. We had a number of our guys on there, showing off the. There's our present chair. Now this is not as a result of drinking the bar dry. She was actually sitting next to somebody who wouldn't stop talking. So she decided she'd go to sleep, and that seemed to work. So anyway, we carried on the conversations with Mike Blackman. He introduced us to Dan Goldstein, who a number of people refer to as Austin Powers because of his rather eccentric way of dressing. Really nice guy. And we had our first formal Schoms trip to ISC in 2010, and I think we took 30 people with us at that point. Schoms funded the accommodation, ISC funded the travel. They gave us a space to meet in that didn't particularly work, so the following year we got an opportunity to use the Schoms Lounge that we've since used every year. And I'm just delighted that it's actually going from strength to strength, and that members of Schoms are still taking it forward and developing it and making it even more valuable visit than at this time. So Stuart was also heavily involved. He was involved with HEPQ in terms of procurement, so knew a large number of suppliers and the right people in the supply and integration sectors, and through his supply liaison, we started to develop the exhibitions as you see today. I think we started with probably about 25 sponsors in the day, but I think that number has increased significantly, as has the income. And to hear that the packages sell out within 9 minutes just goes to show how valuable the suppliers and integrators feel that we are as a sector. Stuart was heavily involved in our developing links with AETM, and it's good to see that Scott's here and Nathan. But our first AETM Vice Chair to come and visit was Derek Powell from University of Queensland. Terry Coe from University of Western Australia has been to see us. We've worked with them to develop the classroom guidelines. And also CCUMC, which is our sister organisation in the States, have also joined Schoms from time to time. Mark McAllister in Newcastle and Sandy Miller more recently in Exeter. So, in terms of how do you say goodbye to a group of friends and people that you've been involved with for a very long time? Well, I'm not sure that I know how to say goodbye. These guys had an interesting. Sound.
Action. I look down on him because we have a parliament and I'm a Scotsman.
I look up to him because his parliament has more powers than my assembly. I look. Because he's got out. I'm a Welshman.
I know my place. I look up to them both. But I don't look up to him as much as I look up to him, because he's a lucky bugger and further from Westminster than what we are. I'm a Geordie.
I've got a parliament, but I've not got much money. Well, no expensive oil anymore. So sometimes I look up to him because he never had any oil at all. Next.
I still look up to him because all I am is sheep. But I'm not as democratically disadvantaged as him, so I still look down on him.
I know my place. I look up to them both. But while I'm ignored by Westminster, I'm honest, industrious, and trustworthy, but most important, I know how to have a good neat.
We all know our place, but what do we get out of it?
I get a feeling of superiority, being a pain in the ass to the Westminster establishment. And we've got Andy Murray.
I get a feeling of inferiority from him, but superiority over him. And we've got Tom Jones.
I get a hangover. We've got Gaza.
So what next for me post Schoms? Well, although I live in a very exotic place, I haven't actually had a lot of opportunity to travel because I don't have enough, I have to work too much and not enough holiday time. So I'm hoping to do some travelling. Our garden is now a jungle and needs some TLC. But also I need to spend time being a grandma. This little boy is 2 years old today. I've only seen him 4 times because of being so far away, but I get my hands on him on Friday night. So yes, need to go and be a grandma for a while. But who knows what's around the corner? So this is the university's main building in Hong Kong. So really all I've got to say is so long, thanks for all the fun, and let the next journey begin.
I think it makes us realise how much Schoms as an association has achieved over the years.
It's achieved a huge amount, yes.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Has anyone got any questions for Toni?
Who did the picture?
Who did the picture? That was from Leeds Beckett's. There was a
We had
cartoonist.
hundreds.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We had hundreds by the end of the conference. Some quite rude as well, though. Yeah.
I think, aren't they on the website? So,
Some were scanned,
yeah.
I think. But yes, I think.
Yes, they're worth a look.
Sorry, Tess. No, no, I'll email it through because I've got the photo.
Where are the bubble trees?
Sorry, Tessa. Tessa's bubble trees, yes. None this time.
Any other questions? No?
No.
Now, Toni,
Oh,
if you struggle to get these back on the plane,
I know. I know.
thank you
That's
so
very
much.
kind of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.